I was out and about looking for images for a book. In fact, I was in Winchester, England, and I was taking in the wonderful medieval cathedral before then having to go and give a speech. I had my new digital camera clutched firmly in my grasp and was walking around like some kind of zombie, staring at the floors, walls, windows, ceiling, and trying desperately not to miss anything. Then, nearby, I noticed a beautiful carving, with Moses leading his people out of Egypt. In the centre, the people of Israel were carrying the Ark of the Covenant on large poles. In the background were the pyramids at Giza. The Ark looked exactly like a small reliquary box I had previously photographed at Kikos Monastery in Cyprus. In fact, it was virtually the same, but obviously much larger, even though hundreds of miles and years separated the two. On the other side of this beautifully carved mausoleum was another wonderful image. This time, Jesus is emerging from a coffer, again looking exactly like the Ark itself. He held the cross and was flanked by two praying angels as the Vesica Piscis, or almond shape, radiated light from behind him. It is moments like this that make the role of the author and researcher worthwhile. It is like uncovering ancient and sacred treasure that has been lost for centuries. Okay, there are no fires, rats, rolling balls or guardians with guns trying to take a shot at you, but during the research for this book, I was to uncover truths which brought me closer to secret. We must begin with the world of the esoteric. The word itself is derived from the Greek eis, meaning into or within. According to most dictionaries, the word means simply something taught to the few or initiated. It has elements of secrecy and inner traditions associated with it. The esoteric elements of the world are those books you read where you know there is more depth, the teachings of secret societies and the many layers of understanding, the hidden truths of the Bible and other religious texts, wisdom literature, mystery religions, and of course, the Gnostics. All of these secrets relate to the world of the mystic. It is an experience that remains with the person forever. It is an experience that changes the individual's attitude to life itself, bringing feelings of oneness with the universe, peace, sometimes calm, and sometimes fever, and often a feeling of presence from a divine being. The experience comes from the inner world of the mind, believed to be in connection to the greater universe or God. Mystics reveal this other world to our world through the only means they know, such as poetry, art, texts, and even structures. Often, these influences from the mind of the mystic are the generative cause of our religions and belief structures. Of course, psychiatrists see in the mystical experience an unhealthy process which takes people away from the real world. Others see the experience as a stepping stone towards higher consciousness. Whatever the truth, our ancestors often enjoyed the experience and did all they could to re-enter the inner world in which they found themselves. Those who could not or did not have the experience instead worshipped and made gods out of those that did. The esoteric or mystical language is an attempt to speak the unspeakable, and thus it becomes a paradox to those who have their feet firmly on terra firma. The mystic's work is to destroy, to wreck, to annihilate, and at the same time to recreate, to establish, to resurrect. The mystic is marvellously terrifying and marvellously mild. The mystic is miserly and open-handed, chivalrous and jealous, asking for all and giving all. It is because of this duality, these opposites in the mind and life of the mystic, that he opens up a third state or channel, and it is through this channel that the mystic is able to see in an alternate way. It is akin to what we call today an altered state of consciousness, and it is because we all live in either one of the opposing worlds that we fail to see the middle way, and thereby also fail to understand the language of the mystic. The inexpressible nature of the mystic is due to the all-encompassing knowledge accessed at the point of the vision or experience. It is supposedly the knowledge of all, of God. This whole aspect will come through in our tale of the Ark, that it is both a metaphysical symbol and a physical representation of that inner reality. To search for it is almost like trying to comprehend the mystic's vision, as we shall discover, and just like the Grail journey, those who look for it will not find it. These mystical elements moved into the Jewish culture and formed it. The ancient concepts of the Ark of the Covenant and the Ark of Noah, which were themselves nothing but influences from Egypt and Mesopotamia, and as we shall learn, India, were updated and resurrected in the Ark of Mary, giving birth to the light. But did the Ark of the Covenant exist at all? An archaeologist from the University of Southern California, Jordan Maxwell, said, "There never was an Ark of the Covenant. It's fictional, as the search for it by Indiana Jones in Raiders of the Lost Ark. As serious scholars, we can all stop looking for that lost Ark of the Covenant and leave it to Hollywood, because that's where it belongs, in the realm of fantasy."
And if you're broken, you can always slip into a dream. And if you never cross, tell him.
Of course, it is easy to say that the object never existed at all, but impossible to prove. The fact remains that there are numerous parallels in history, such as the Egyptian barks, which carried their deities and their own souls. Upon examining the Ark in detail from the biblical statements, it becomes distinctly clear that it was in fact a close copy of an Egyptian portable bark. The simple fact is that instead of crossing the sky or waters, this Ark had to cross land and desert. Graham Hancock, the only writer to study the tradition of the Ark in Axum at any length, perceived the Ark's presence there as a reality. It was the single and ancient recondite truth concealed beneath the layers of myth and magic. Ironically, despite Hancock's affirmation of the incredible legend of the Ark at Axum, I have never met an Ethiopian who commends his book. These are the words of Stuart Munro Hay from his very scholarly book, The Quest for the Ark of the Covenant. Munro Hay, in my reading of the subject, had no axe to grind, other than his own deep knowledge and love of Ethiopia. I have also spoken to other people who have been to Axum in Ethiopia about the culture of the people. It does appear that unless one speaks the language of the land, then little will be revealed. However, Those who do take the time to learn the ways and creeds are rewarded with the truth, which is that the Ark at Axum is a taboo, of which we shall speak more later.
What you are, I'll never be.
The truth of the Ark in Ethiopia must circumvent various problems, the least of which is the fact that the one at Axum isn't the Ark of the Covenant. The path that leads to the Ark begins well over 1,000 years before the emperors of Axum raised their mighty obelisks, and perhaps 1,500 years before the first Christian king, Izana, is reputed to have built the church in which the supposed Ark was one day to reside. This is an immense period of time, and absolutely anything could have happened to the Ark. In all this time, there would have been some text somewhere about the Ark, but there was nothing. In all this time, there has been nothing but a belief. What we do have, as far as sightings go, are slabs of stone or wood, known as taboo. It has been propositioned that these slabs are either the original tablets of stone from the Ark, placed there by Moses, or that they are copies of the same. They could also be original or copies of the first broken tablets that Moses threw to the ground when he saw the people of Israel worshipping the golden calf.
Open my heart and nothing is there.
The fact remains that the taboo is the intimate and almost ultimate ritualistic device or tool for connection to God in the Ethiopian church. In this way, the use of the taboo is little different to that of the original Ark. It is paraded, it is worshipped, revered, and it contains God. The concepts are the same, the beliefs the same, and so it may be said that the Ark does indeed lay in the church of Mary Zion in Axum. But it isn't the physical Ark, and so our attention must turn elsewhere. Mount Sinai is known often as the Mountain of God, because the Israelites truly believed this to be where their God resided. We find that Mount Sinai is where Moses met with the burning bush, and also from where he descended with the tablets of the law. Are there any clues in this story about this mountain which still remain unfound? Well, this is one of the few places that God is said to have physically appeared. In Exodus, "And the Lord said unto Moses, Lo, I come unto thee in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak. And Mount Sinai was altogether in smoke, because the Lord descended it in fire. And the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked greatly. And the glory of the Lord abode upon Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. And the 7th day he called unto Moses out of the midst of the cloud, and the sight of the glory of the Lord was like devouring fire on the top of the mount in the eyes of the children of Israel." So what do we have here? Well, we could easily interpret this in several ways. We could easily say that this is the folk memory of some volcanic deity, which of course Yahweh was, and that the priesthood interpreted their volcanic deity through the actions of the sacred volcano. We could also say that they were all on drugs and having a good time. However, there is another side to this peculiar connectivity with the Israelite deity, and one which seems to have a golden thread throughout time. What we have here is symbolic language and a way of stating connection to the deity which remained with us for millennia. The Enlightenment is often represented as fire, serpent or solar fire. We can see this in Acts 2, whereby the enlightened apostles all received the fire on their heads. And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them. This is the true spiritual point of awakening, supposedly achieved by such avatars as Moses and Buddha alike. In truth, our ancestors related the light of the sun and the stars, and so our own inner light was related to the 7 planets, to measurement and navigation. Hence, the all-encompassing use of the ship as a symbol such as the Ark. It is symbolic language like this which clouds the true vision, and it takes explanation to clear the smoke, and to truly see the glorious and yet terrible fire of God, the inner duality in balance. So, in this explanation, and all could indeed be valid, we have Moses connecting to his inner self, the inner sun or light of the sun. He is doing this via the law of chaos and creation, the wisdom of Thoth, and emerging as the enlightened one with shining horns and illuminated countenance. Only by connecting in this way will we know the path ahead, and we will be able to lead others. Of course, there is another clue. According to Graham Phillips, in the Templars and the Ark of the Covenant, Mount Sinai is also the place where Jeremiah supposedly buried the Ark. In attempting to try and locate the real Mount Sinai, we are of course attempting to find something that may never in fact have existed. We are led to believe, however, that the mountain of Sinai was somewhere in the Sinai wilderness, or the wilderness of the moon god Sin or Thoth. Let's just have a look at Exodus for a clue. In the 3rd month, when the children of Israel were gone forth out of the land of Egypt, for they were departed from Rephidim, and were come to the desert of Sinai. Where is this Rephidim, from whence they had departed? It is not a true location in the sense of the word. Instead it means place of rest. Quite simply, the place of rest in the wilderness is the point between awake and asleep, between this world and the next, between the pillars. It is the twilight zone in the land of the moon god, and only here could they contact their god. Of course, the moon god is important because it is lit by the light of the sun. And this is the supposed real location, the literal place that thousands claim the aged Moses climbed 3,000 steps in searing heat to meet his god. If there is literal truth in any of the biblical story of this place, then we must overcome these issues of the supposed location. However, those who believe in the literalisms of the Bible circumnavigate these issues by simply moving the location to any number of other places. There is, however, a place that archaeological exploration has uncovered evidence of all that I was finding. The location was Har Kakom, a place many archaeologists believe to be the real Mount Sinai. It is located on the Sinai Peninsula and is part of a very ancient trade route in the Negev desert. It has taken over 20 years of excavations and hundreds of experts to uncover some amazing finds, and one of these is the discovery of an ancient tumuli on the eastern edge. The profile of this tumuli may be seen for many miles around as a man-made world mounting, and it was thought that it might contain a burial of some great ancestor. Nothing of the sort was found. Instead, what was discovered puzzled archaeologists. Lying on a large rectangular boulder was a large white stone shaped into a semicircle like the moon. This was a mounting of the white moon god Sin, and the object had been placed in the very centre of this man-made mountain. In fact, the stones used to cover and protect the white stone were perfectly black, like the night sky. This was an exciting discovery for the researchers. Further down the mountain, they had previously discovered ibex cult scenes on the rock, and the horns of the ibex symbolised the moon god Sin. In Exodus we read, "And Moses wrote all the words of the Lord, and rose up early in the morning, and built an altar under the hill, and 12 pillars." This hill is of course Mount Sinai, and archaeologists found 12 standing stones beneath Har Kakom. It seems then, from this and more evidence, that we may in fact have a real location for the biblical Mount Sinai, and evidence that Sin should indeed be equated to Sinai, and thereby Moses to Sin or Thoth, all lunar deities. So I decided it was time to take a look at the word sin, to see if there could be any clue in the name. The word does in fact come from the root Syriac, meaning to shine, and comes to us as sin via the Babylonian Sinu, for the moon. This shining aspect also comes through in the fact that the desert of Sin was so named because of its glare from the white chalk. It seems then that the moon is named Sin because it shines by the light of the sun. This was also made upon the earth as a connection to the light of the sun, which was still seen to be alive, even in night. So too, even in darkness, we ourselves may shine, so say the Gnostics. However, getting back to the Ark, if we try to accept for a moment that there was a real Ark, even if we believe this to be a copy of some Egyptian bark or Mesopotamian throne of God, then we must attempt to trace this treasure, as so many authors have in the past. According to many authors, we must look to the prophet Jeremiah and to the second book of Maccabees, where we find that the prophet Jeremiah has been warned of the impending doom of the Temple of Solomon by an oracle, and forced Jeremiah to give instructions for the tabernacle and the ark to go with him when he set out for the mountain which Moses had climbed to survey God's heritage. On his arrival, Jeremiah found a cave dwelling, into which he brought the tabernacle, the ark, and the altars of incense, afterwards blocking up the entrance. Literally, hundreds of authors have jumped on this tradition and claimed that it must now point to the location of the Ark, hidden by Jeremiah in some magical cave. But we have to take this apart to understand the true meaning. Firstly, Jeremiah is supposed to have lived between 650 and 580 BC, and yet 2 Maccabees was written 100 BC to 70 AD. There are a couple of reasons that Jeremiah and the Ark were used at this time. Firstly, and most simply, it is pure propaganda. The Greeks and Romans were in the land of the Israelites during these periods, and the Israelites, especially the Pharisees, of which the writer of 2 Maccabees was one, were against these intrusions. We find at this time that the Essene and others escape or migrate to Damascus, to the region known as Haran, and remain in exile while they develop their new covenant ideas, and begin the Jesus fable. The one individual these groups look up to is called the true teacher or lawgiver. This is of course none other than Thoth, and is a title. This powerful individual is also none other than God himself, as it was God who gave the law to Moses on the mountain of the moon god, and the moon is of course Thoth. This is also the same Thoth who gives his name to the first part of that unlucky pharaoh, Tutankhamun, where Tut is simply Thoth. And what did archaeologists discover in the tomb of Tutankhamun but arks? Tutankhamun is the lawgiver incarnate as man, just as many before were and many following would become. The Essene would make the greatest one of all and call him the New Covenant, Jesus. The same Jesus who we supposedly discover imaged by a great and powerful light in the Shroud of Turin. But more on this later. Jesus was in effect to bring the new law. These Templars, as repositories of unorthodox and esoteric teaching, did indeed have contact and very close links with their Jewish and Islamic brothers in the Middle East. It is Hugh Schonfield's assertion that the Templars would have been able to gain access to much Essene teaching, and that this must therefore be the hidden legacy uncovered by the Templars on their journeys into the true temple. It is no surprise therefore to find that the Essene, like Jeremiah, also deposited their wisdom in vessels in caves, hence the wonderful discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I was not prepared at this point to uncover the true origin of the Templars, but later I was to discover that Schonfield and other authors had been more than right in their beliefs. Now, I wanted to just see if this idea or concept of written arks on parchment or skin and hidden as treasure could be taken any further, and if there were any links to the ark. Well, there was a Greek legend of the Argo, which has been linked to the ark as a ship bearing a deity. This ship and its crew were on a journey, a voyage of discovery. The word itself derived from the maker or creator of the vessel, Argos, which also means guardian or watcher in Greek. We actually find that the fabled golden fleece for which the Argo and her valiant crew sought was in fact vellum. Fleece does actually originate in the Germanic vlus, meaning sheepskin. It was Trismosian's assertion that the golden fleece was in fact the secret of the philosopher's stone. In fact, Trismosian was quite right. The whole journey of the Argonauts is one of the alchemist, Gnostic, mystic, an exponent of the esoteric. And so, in the true sense of the word, this ark, the Argo, was the guide or guardian of the deeper secrets of the mind. To discover the secret, we would have to journey inwards. What now briefly sailed across and through my mind regarding the Greek Argonauts was the link between Greece and the Hebrew, Egyptian, Indian and Ethiopian arks that I knew at this point to vaguely exist. Then I discovered the Kabiri. The goddess worship and were also protectors of sailors and excellent navigators, which links remarkably well to the Argonauts and the ark as a boat. In essence, a lot can be attributed to the cult of the stars, and it is thought that the two Kabiri were initially sacred meteorites that fell from the stars and were then kept within sacred containers, becoming stellar arks. The exact etymology of the Kabiri is also much debated, and so I thought I ought to take a look. Kabar in Sumer. So, it seemed the worship of these fallen stones, or Beth Els, meaning house of God, or shining house, needed some kind of casket or container, like a bark or ark, and that the worship of them spread. What were the stones that Moses therefore brought down from Sinai but meteorites? In fact, Jewish tradition states that the tablets themselves were formed by using the sapphire which God had removed from his throne in heaven, the sky, and had cast down into the abyss. This would have relationship to the law, as the stars themselves were responsible for measurement on earth. We navigated and measured by their positions. This creative principle is the Bethel of Osiris, the phallus, the divine spark, seen to fall from the sky as if in some battle of the deities, and very much firmly based in a literal and physical event, a falling god or part of a god, who was then encased in the tree or casket. This aspect of the tree would then take on great significance in the tales of Osiris and even Vishnu. The Ark would be created to hold the sacred stones. Sinai is of course nothing different in ancient mythology to what is known as the Cosmic Mountain, the location which connects heaven to earth. It is the place where Moses would have indeed gone to collect the meteorite stones of the Lord from heaven. The stones, the meteorites, are the sperm, the creative principle, the law of the universe, and it is this law that was written upon the stones, not the 10 Commandments as we know them today. The two stones represented the superior and inferior worlds, both governed by law, seen and unseen, oral and written. The Kabiri were meteorite stones, just like the Kaaba, which is also believed to have been two stones. This breaking of the stones and their casting down to earth represented the division of the superior and inferior worlds, often depicted as male and female, positive and negative, thus forming a world between above and below. It seems onto these very stones were not just added the law, but also many esoteric traditions. The gods were brought down the mountainside by Moses and placed into the ark. The stones are the Kabiri, the deities, the heavenly host, the manna that fell from heaven, the law or Torah of the Kabbalists. Unfortunately, it is the mind of man which must split things apart and create destructive dualities that creates mysteries. Our ancestors saw all things, physical and metaphysical, in union. Here I was, having uncovered the true esoteric secrets of the Ark of the Covenant, to find that it may never in fact have been a real item. But as ever, with internal psychological or religious matters, what we call the esoteric, mankind cleverly manifests into reality. That is, they make the items, artifacts, or indeed prophecies, come true. The book of Hebrews attempts to confirm that it came in the form of the new ark, Mary, who carried the law within her. So all we have to do is find Mary, and we at least find the second ark. Well, if only life were so easy. The truth being that Mary is frustratingly almost impossible to find. But there is a church from the late 19th to early 20th century called Our Lady Ark of the Covenant Church, or Monastery, on Notre Dame Street, at the entrance to Abu Ghosh in Israel. The site is Roman Catholic, and the statue of Mary holding the Christ child at the pinnacle is paramount for all to see. From the front, Jesus is obviously a child. However, when viewed from behind, the image transforms and the child grows into a man. Mary and Christ standing tall and equal. They both stand on top of a shroud-covered ark, with Christ holding the contents, the manna and the tablets. Basically, what we have here is the overlaying of Mary on one of the very locations that the ark resided. We also have a distinct correlation between Mary as the Christ carrier and the ark as the carrier of God. The church looks to Mary, Ark of the New Covenant. She, like the ark, was the repository of God's presence. Mary became the repository not simply of the tablets of the law, but of the lawgiver himself. Not simply of the desert manna, but of the living bread from heaven. Hence they called her such titles as Abode of the King, Tabernacle of the Lord, Ark of Holiness, and Ark of the Covenant. She is the inmost shrine, the Holy of Holies. What we have here, clearly laid out and unopposed by the Catholic authorities, is the statement that Mary is the new Ark of the Covenant, in that she represents the exact same thing, the connection to and gateway to God. This of course makes Jesus the law or lawgiver. He was the tablets of stone within the ark. And this association led me now onto an amazing link with the Shroud of Turin. I had recently read Ian Wilson's excellent book, The Blood and the Shroud, where Wilson is speaking about the Edessa cloth, which he links strongly to the Shroud of Turin. On 15th August 944, clearly chosen because it was the Feast of the Assumption, the cloth was carried by boat across the Bosphorus to St Mary at Blakeney, where it was viewed and venerated by Byzantine royals. There were a couple of things that immediately struck me. Firstly, that a feast day of Mary had been chosen in relationship to the veneration of the Shroud, and secondly, that the Edessa cloth itself had repeatedly been associated with her. Were the Ark, the Shroud and Mary all one and the same in symbolism? There may have been many replica Arks, there may have been many Marys and Mother Goddesses, and there may indeed have been many Shrouds, but the only distinct conclusion I drew from all of this was that they all meant the same thing. They were all symbols of the higher state of enlightenment available to mankind, and which has been perceived as contact with the divinity, which is always shown to be residing within. The Ark contained the deity, Mary the same, and the Shroud too. We were all these things. One of my favourite alchemists, mystics and philosophers, Paracelsus, said that whatever it was that allowed Solomon to build the temple, or Moses to construct the contents of the ark, it was something that was in balance. It was something that was neither good nor bad. It was neutral. He also tells us that this is the highest and most concealed of God's secrets. No wonder then that mankind has sought this truth ever since he became aware of it. But this neutral position is also to be found in architecture, placed there by the Freemasons, who understood the concepts once. Arca Caderis, and which very roughly translates as "you are to work through the ark," is in fact what most medieval masons were trying to get across. The ark, as the centre point between male and female opposites, is the place where we must be to produce the good work. It is the centre of the void, and is access to the other world where peace and heaven lay, within the mind of the adept. Now, with my previous knowledge of the Naga serpent cults and the Enlightenment, I just had to turn to India. In truth, as far as the Ark is concerned, India is a country virtually ignored by modern historians, both alternative and mainstream. Modern scholarly research has shown that the Vedic origins of India and its customs influenced the Egyptians, Babylonians, and even the Hebrews. These same sources also tell us that Ethiopia itself was also colonised by these same Indians, and that the Brahmins were nothing different to the Druids. There will be little surprise therefore to find elements of the original Ark in India. We should also consider, however briefly, that the Hindu semi-divine Mani, via this melting pot of Egyptians and Babylonians, turned to Manes, Minos, and eventually Moses, the lawgiver of India, and this being no different to how Brahma became Abraham, or Krishna, Christ. I just knew that the Ark, or traces of it, would be found in the religious texts or rituals of this amazing place, and so I scoured books, articles, and contacted experts. Nobody, it seemed, had any idea of anything like the Ark in India. How could there possibly be such a thing? But then I found it whilst going through some old pictures of India I had. One of them struck me, and I dropped the rest. This one picture led me on a journey into the heart of India and on the trail of the Indian Ark, which is still there today for all to see. It was the festival of the Juggernaut. Juggernaut, we are told in various dictionaries, can mean any massive object or inexorable force that advances, crushing whatever may be in its path. Alternatively, it is an idea or custom to which one devotes oneself. Both explanations will turn out to be true. The word derives from the deity Jagannath, meaning Lord of the World, and the festival of Jagannath can still today be found in the infamous shrine at Puri in the state of Orissa. Orissa has virtually the same ground plan as the Temple of Solomon, following sacred geometric ratios. Close by, at Konarak, we also have a temple to the sun. In fact, the entire temple is a manifestation of the chariot of the sun, the Rath or Ark of the sun itself, built to an enormous scale in stone. These Ratha festivals actually occur across India, and were quite often, as in Egypt and elsewhere, the only way the people could see their deities. The deity is placed at the very centre of the transport, and indeed, like the New Covenant and Old, taking part in the religious act guaranteed absolution. With the Jagannath cult rituals, we actually have the inner wisdom realised physically and symbolically for all to see. These created images are the replica of divinities realised above physical and mental consciousness. In essence, we are told that to comprehend Jagannath properly, we must understand ourselves, have achieved enlightenment and access to the divine. India, it seemed, was frothing over with vessels and transportation for their various deities. It was a carrier of light. What I was discovering on my Ark journey was that no matter which direction I sailed in, I was constantly blown back to the Gnostic and esoteric port. Wisdom and light are the sails of the various boats I was finding on my quest into the past. The ship of Isis, known as the Shining Light, was taken everywhere in Egypt for all to see. Even the Celtic version of the great ship was called Light. As the navigators of old needed the light of a star, the moon or the sun to guide his path, so too it seems the light of wisdom is casting a faint glow upon the dark sea before me. knowledge of the location of the Shroud. Also in this view, I found myself relating something that without this knowledge seemed quite bizarre. The Templars, the warrior monks, were themselves connected in various ways to the Cistercians. This peaceful However, God at this stage in the game, in Exodus, is still speaking in plural terms, such as we are. And so I wanted to know what the plural version of am was in Old English, and was amazed to discover that it was dark has the same meaning in language and symbolism as the Shroud. They are spoken of in the same breath. The only thing that now remained in my investigation was one of the biggest questions of all. Is the Shroud of Turin the real burial shroud of Jesus Christ? The question was massive, and any answer would be extremely controversial. But there was another question. How was it made? In 1988, the pressure was on to use the new scientific technique of carbon dating. The Church finally agreed to the test, and samples were distributed to the top carbon-14 dating laboratories around the globe. The whole world waited anxiously. It appeared that the flax from the linen had been harvested sometime between 1260 and 1390. The world again erupted with the new headlines: forgery. However, within days the carbon-14 testing itself was under scrutiny, as there were found to be too many anomalies. People were involved that should not have been. The laboratories were found to have leaked information. The blind test had not been blind, as it was admitted that the weave was easy to recognise, and the scientists themselves were a little too overjoyed at their results. Few in the Christian camp took the dating seriously, and it appears now that they had good reason. To Add to this, it was then found that all the radiocarbon dating published by the British Museum between 1980 and 1984 had been incorrect. Now, the 1988 carbon-14 dating has been proven categorically to be incorrect in most, if not all, peer-reviewed journals. None of this, however, reveals how the shroud was made in the first place. It just reveals the hoax was not necessarily a hoax. So what is the Shroud of Turin really? Well, there are no signs of decomposition, as attested to by just about every scientist who ever looked at it. The man in the shroud was aged between 30 and 35, which matches the biblical statements. Either the Bible is right, the shroud is a copy of the story of the Bible, or the Bible was written after seeing the image on the shroud. The image itself is indelible and heat resistant, unlike paintings. One popular theory is that the image was created by a natural amino-carbonyl reaction, which is a chemical process of a decaying body, but this would not have been heat resistant nor indelible. So was the shroud created, and does it have any relationship to the Enlightenment process scientifically? The Shroud of Turin research project found that the image was in fact not made up of any physical substance such as paint or pigment. It was an alteration of the surface of the linen by some effect such as light or radiation. In a letter to the editor of Nature magazine, Dr. Thomas J. Phillips of Harvard University posited the following explanation: that the body of Christ, or whoever it was, may have radiated neutrons, which would have irradiated the shroud and changed some of the nuclei to different isotopes by neutron capture. All of this is perfectly in line with the Enlightenment experience. In simple terms, the adept meditates, prays, dances, fasts, or takes drugs to alter the state of consciousness, and thereby raises his own body energy levels into heightened states. This basically excites the atoms within the body, stimulating heat generation, as seen by spontaneous human combustion, and in subjects who have undergone scientific analysis following such processes as awakening sessions. Add to this, the process also aids the escape of neutrons from atoms, causing neutron radiation. Add on to this any kind of embalming or anointing fluid which may have been placed upon the body of the very alive man, and we may in fact have a magnification of the radiation in process, thereby imparting the image onto the shroud's linen without the use of any physical substance, which is what the evidence tells us. In fact, a mixture of olive oil with sweat has been shown by scientists to work as a catalyst for image creation when light or radiation is applied. The shroud was a fragile yellowing cloth. This yellowing is due to oxidation, dehydration and conjugation of the cellulose. The fact remains that only radiation and a few acids we know today could cause this. In the end, if we remove the impossible, then what we are left with is the probable. There are bioelectrical fields, which are electromagnetic signals running throughout the body, which is made up of a substance, salt water, that allows the free movement of current. Quantum physics tells us that photons react in peculiar ways, and in my own work I have found that all things are interrelated, interconnected, and unlike our modern scientists, I do not see all these things separately. They are all related, and if, as has been proven, the body can excite via the control of the mind, then it can emit photons from the atom itself, and thereby electromagnetically discharge radiation, which is what the evidence shows on the shroud. Could it be, I wondered, that the image on the shroud was that of an adept who had been in an excited state of ecstasy or enlightenment, which had emitted a distinct radiation? This enlightenment, I had already discovered, was to be found in the in-between state, between cycles of positive and negative energy, between awake and asleep. And then the thought struck me, it was also between life and death. The number of out-of-body experiences I had researched and near-death experiences where subjects had seen bright lights, had increases in body temperature and were in states of excitement or ecstasy, all related perfectly well. These were people who had been either clinically dead or near death. They had all had peculiar bodily effects such as raised body temperature, and they were all psychologically transformed afterwards, as if resurrected. The man in the shroud had been beaten to a pulp, nailed to a cross, and was surely near death. He was, whoever he may have been, in between this world and the next. You just couldn't get any more extreme than that. Even today, many individuals around the world enter states of high mental excitement and religious fervour by crucifying themselves in copycat form. At the end of the day, I thought, if this were true, then it was just like the supposed statements regarding the ark emitting light. There is little wonder that Christ is depicted emerging from the glorious rays of the other world via the sacred Vesica Piscis. In almost every way, whether esoteric or physical, the ark, the shroud, and of course Mary, the mother of Jesus, all carried the light of the divine.